Hello and welcome back to All Booked Up. Today we are going to be starting a series called Should I Read? And this is something I'm going to do semi-regularly on the channel, especially when I've finished a series or a standalone book. And the aim of it is to help you guys decide whether this is a series or a book you want to pick up. So we're going to start firstly with a small synopsis of the series, of what's going to be going on with it. We're going to give you some pros, sprinkle in some cons, and then give you a bit of a conclusion as to whether or not I liked it. And hopefully that'll give you a good idea as to whether this is a series you would like to pick up and get stuck into. Today we are going to be looking at the Long Price Quartet, which you may have seen me speak about before. It is by an author called Daniel Abraham, and let's jump straight into the synopsis. So the Long Price Quartet is a 4-book series loosely inspired by Eastern cultures, and it is set in the lands of the Cayenne. So the Cayenne is a group of city-states. The only magic we really get to see in this series is from a set of beings called the Ondot. So the Ondot are essentially ideas made manifest. The people who are magic users in this world are referred to as poets, and what they essentially do is they bind this idea to their will, and then they are in charge of it. So that is what we see with the cities of the Cayenne. It is the only nation in this world that actually has access to the Ondot, and that is what makes them particularly powerful. They are not necessarily powerful militarily. They do not really rely on the military. What they do rely on is an economic advantage that they have. So the Ondot are normally something that actually gives them a real economic boost. So the first Ondot we are introduced into is called Seedless, or his full name is Removing the Part That Continues. So the idea we see with him is that he removes the seeds from cotton plants, thus making it a much quicker, more effective process for the city that has Seedless in. And they have a real boost to their economy. Their whole focus is on the cotton trade, and they essentially exhibit economic dominance on the world around them. And that is the main idea of the Ondot, is that it is giving the cities of the Cayenne just a massive economic boost, and that is what gives them the position of prominence they have in this world. We talked about the poets. The poets are often come from noble families. They're often younger sons of noble families, and when they do become a poet, they remove themselves from succession and from any debate about that. They take a brand, and then when they've taken that brand, they can no longer become one of the leaders, called a Kai. So that's basically the broad strokes idea of the world. Let's jump into some pros and some cons. So the first pro number one, Daniel Abraham has wonderful character arcs. His characters develop, they change as they age, and the arcs he takes you on with them is just wonderful. They are some of the most real characters, and with some of the most real character growth I have read in a very, very long time. You go with these characters as they age, and you see how they change, and you see how the events of the first couple of books actually really change them and affect them in books 3 and 4. And I think that is wonderful. It's just something he does incredibly well. They are characters we really know and we understand, and that's a big positive for me and for you if you are a character reader. The first con we have with this series is something you will have seen talked about a lot if you know anything about the series. People accuse it of having a far too slow pace. Now, I would say that I don't actually think that the pace is that slow. I think what people mean by this is actually that it's a very quiet series. It's very internal for your characters. There's a lot of internal conflict, and then that comes sort of from that. When that is resolved, it shows itself in an external action. It's not actually that I think it's too slow paced or not much happens. I think just there's not any massive action scenes. That's particularly true of book 1. It is still quite true for the whole series, but book 1 particularly has this where there's basically 0 action scenes. Now that might mean that for you, if you're into swashbuckling adventures, if you want something that is punchy and stuff is happening and it's exciting the whole time, the series may not be for you, but it is a beautiful slow burn, I promise. Positive number 2, pro number 2. This world is a beautiful setting. It is a really interesting setting. The cultures are found really well, and along with that, Daniel Abraham writes a beautiful style of prose. There are sentences and paragraphs that just hit in a way that the way he words it makes it hit so much harder than if he'd worded it differently. I think it is a really impressive level of prose, especially for a debut series. And I would say that it is one of the more beautiful styles of prose you're going to read. My second and final negative is if you are someone who does not like time jumps in your series, this series could be an issue for you. So between book 1 and 2, there is a 14-year jump. Between book 2 and 3, there is another 14-year jump. Between book 3 and book 4, there is another 14-year jump. So we have these massive time jumps between books. So it can feel a little bit like you're getting a little vignette of each character at each stage of life, but it doesn't fill in all those gaps for you. If he did this, it would be a ridiculously large series. So Daniel Abraham has really worked to give us these little chunks of important things that happen in these characters' lives. What I would say is within each book there aren't any time jumps. So each individual book does follow a pretty small window of time. We don't have those big time jumps. It is actually just between the books that we get that. And to my third and final positive, we're going to go for, I think this series has some of the most beautiful exploration of themes I have ever seen, particularly in a fantasy series. There are themes of nationalism, of personal responsibility, themes of what your legacy is that you leave behind. There's so much about parenthood and being a father and being a child. And I just think all of these themes are really amazingly explored. Considering that each of these books is only about 350 pages, there is such depth of thematic reasoning stuck in here. There is such a deep and philosophical approach to all these things, and I think that actually Abraham does an amazing job at exploring them in a way that is just it just hits the nail on the head. It resonated with me, particularly the themes of parenthood and legacy I thought were really nicely dealt with, and they really challenged me in how I think. I think nationalism and actually our personal responsibility was also another brilliant set of themes, and I think that was just really beautifully explored. If that's something you like in your fantasy, if you like thematic writing, if you like sort of philosophical discussion, but not at the forefront, very much as subtext, if you like that, this could be another good series for you, and I would definitely say that's one of its big draws. So, in conclusion, should you read the Long Price Quartet? Well, I hope that some of those negatives and positives I've given you are going to give you a good idea if the series is for you. For me personally, I absolutely adored this series, as you can probably tell. I think it is wonderful and often tragic, but the themes it explores are beautiful. The characters it explores are beautiful as well and are really well done. But yeah, if you really need a bit of pace and a bit of action, this series might be a skip for you. Drop a like, drop a subscribe, and I will hopefully see you next time.